I'm very good, Scott. I'm very good. The weather has been absolutely insane over here. We had 20 degrees of sunshine, then we had snow, and now we're back to around 12 degrees of sunshine and snow at the same time. It's just after 18 years living in New Zealand, this is just the bizarrest weather I've experienced in a long time.
Yeah, I saw in the news when we were watching uh, something around the UK that there was snow on. Anyway, so hello, Paul. Nassim, are you with us?
Yes, I am. I'm here in more managed weather that stays a little bit more consistent. No rain, no snow.
That's great. Okay, guys. Well, it's 7:03 here in Auckland, New Zealand. I think we should just get underway. We've got quite a lot of people on board today. So, first of all, to everybody who's watching, welcome. My name is Scott Matheson. I am the founder of Working in New Zealand. My partner and I set this business up over 20 years ago. So we're still doing it. We love it. This is our passion. And I want to say to you today, congratulations on being here, on taking your first very, very brave step in thinking at least about immigrating. Got two wonderful panelists on today, which you may have just seen while I was having a chat with them. But I'll introduce you formally now. Paul and Goddard in the UK. Paul, can you please say a few words?
Yeah, hi Scott, and hi everyone on here. Wow, loads and loads of people on here tonight, which is awesome. You're all obviously all keen to move to New Zealand like I did, which is great. Yeah, I moved to New Zealand back in 2003. Had the whole thing filmed by the BBC. I wouldn't recommend that to anyone as a strategy for making the move, but it was an experience to say the least. And had an amazing life in New Zealand. Can't wait to get back to New Zealand at some point in the future as well. But if you want to make the move, you're in the right place. You're going to get some really good information tonight, and then we're going to invite you to do some things and get access to me. After at the end of the call as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, this is going to be a very succinct 30 minutes, but we're going to pack as much as we can. And then with, hey, what's next? What's next? What's the next step? Whether you use us or not, this is all about momentum. Migration is about momentum. Next panelist, who has been with Working In for over 10 years now, our head of immigration and visas, Nassim Lalazari. Nassim, can you say a few words, please?
Hi everyone, I'm Nassim. I've been in New Zealand for 12 years, 10 of those with Working In, as Scott's just advised. I originally studied law and became a migration agent for New Zealand, and I've been helping thousands of people, literally thousands of people during that time, along with Scott and Paul. As a licensed immigration advisor, I have to get renewed every year to make sure that everything that I do and my team does is, always up to date. So we basically have to get checked all the time to make sure that we know what we're doing. So all the advice that we tell you is always up to date and in line with the current situation for migration.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I'll just reiterate that point to all the listeners and the watchers is that both Paul and Nassim are licensed immigration advisors, which means that they are basically approved on an annual basis by the government. So they are entitled to and regulated to give advice on immigration, which is a very tricky field. So, and just finally, my name is Scott Matheson, as I said before. We're based in Auckland. I'm here. It's just after 7 o'clock in the morning on a beautiful day. And yes, we've just been through quite a torrid year, really, and it continues to sort of go on around the world. New Zealand's in a good spot, though. You probably know that with our borders, we're able to keep people isolated so that COVID hasn't spread into the community, which has actually done some magnificent things for New Zealand. It's grown our economy. Who would have thought? Our unemployment rate is still very low, and things are really actually moving along at quite a pace economically. And of course, people are very happy and proud to be here as well. But look, COVID is not the reason to move. Immigration is normally for life, and it is a big, big move. But we've been doing this for so many years. We know that there's a lot of people out there that, despite COVID, or COVID might just have been the last straw on the camel's back. And it's been a thought for years. the whole landscape is changing, though. There are a lot of considerations. It is getting more difficult. It is getting more challenging. And of course, you do need a job to migrate in most circumstances, unless you are extremely well heeled. So on that note, I just think I will hand you over to Paul, because Paul, there's something called the Catch-22. Actually, before I do that, I'm just going to assume that most of you out there, or all of you out there, have some fair degree of knowledge about New Zealand. And because we're not going to start as why you want to move to New Zealand and our lifestyle and all those sorts of things, because we kind of assume that that's a given, that that we're a country of 5 million people the size of the UK. There is less traffic, there is more time, there is a good lifestyle, there is the outdoors, and we assume you understand all that. So we're kind of going to get into the nitty gritty of actually how to from this point on. So Paul, on that note, the Catch-22, the job, the visa, how does it all work, please?
Yeah, I mean, anyone, as you say, Scott, who's done any kind of basic research into New Zealand will know that you need a job offer to get a visa. And this creates a catch-22 situation, because most of the jobs that you see advertised online will say something like, you need a visa to apply for this role, or only residents can apply for this role. And that's usually put there because of the doubt or fear that's in the employer's mind. If you just email a CV off to an employer in New Zealand, they'll look at it and say, this person looks great. And if they were in New Zealand right now and they had a visa, I'd give them a job. But they're not. I don't know if they're going to get a visa. I don't know when they're going to get a visa. I don't know what I've got to do so that they can get a visa. There's this endless list of doubts and fears that are in the employer's minds, and it creates this catch-22 of, I can't lodge a visa application, but I can't lodge a job application. So where the hell do I start? And where you start is actually getting a plan and getting on track.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think probably one of the big questions that people have is, but the borders are closed, so I can't move. And to a large extent, that is true. We are actually bringing some people in through border exemptions, but other people are going through the process and getting ready for when the borders will inevitably open. So next week, for example, there's a bubble that's opening between Australia and New Zealand, which is the first time we've essentially opened our borders. People coming for Australia don't need to go into managed isolation. They can just walk straight through the airport. So that's very new for us. And it's the beginning of a thawing of the borders. So look, I think Nassim, next is, hey, how does that visa process work? And what is your advice for people who might not meet border exemptions now, but could get a job offer and could move as soon as the borders are open? Because that's really important. Nassim.
Yeah, so in normal times, normal times pre-COVID, or if you're currently here in New Zealand, you would be applying for a temporary visa, and because that's obviously processed more quickly, you're talking weeks, sometimes even days, and then you'd also be preparing your residence application, which can currently take a while to process, and that would be the next step. For anyone that's overseas, we've got an additional step in that we have to do the border exemption. So as Scott's mentioned, not everyone will qualify for the border exemption. There's only certain roles or people for certain employers who'll be able to use and utilize that pathway. We've obviously been doing it for the last year. Some of the people that are on here have possibly gone through that process. It's good to see people who we've already assisted online. But for the majority of people, the border exemption isn't going to be the pathway into New Zealand at the moment. But what we're also finding is that you actually need to be prepared and get everything together as soon as possible. So the first thing that we always notice, wherever the clients come from, is that they tell us, I've got everything ready, I'm able to lodge an application tomorrow, I'm good to go. And once we start to look at their documents and we look at the immigration strategy and process we're going to take, we realize that they're actually not. And this is also part of what employers want to know as well, is that how far along in the process you are. So what you need to do is actually start getting prepared so that once the borders are open or there's an additional category added to the exemption list, you can actually apply, because you don't want to miss out by being a little bit slow or thinking, oh, I'll get that later, I've got time, because what we find is that that's not always the case. anything you need to obtain now, you should be getting now. You know, the sooner you can do it, the sooner you can move. So that's all I can say is make sure you start the process sooner, so that, you know, you've got your work visa and residence documents already, and for the possibility that your occupation also falls within the border exemptions, that you can utilize that as well.
Okay, so I'm going to just try and summarize that. You get a job offer, and then you apply for a work visa, which is also called a temporary visa. Once you're down here, you can apply for residency, and that's obviously what most people would do, but we would make sure that you could before you did that. But in addition, because it's COVID, you would need to apply for a border exemption, and only some people would actually qualify for that border exemption. Now, I know that we've brought in a lot of people under the border exemption policy, and most of them are very senior and quite unique. On the flip side, and I think this is really relevant to everybody who's listening, is that the demand for employment in New Zealand in many, many sectors is extremely strong. And it's not just construction and infrastructure and healthcare, it's all over the place. I know somebody who owns a hairdressing salon, can't find anybody. Because the borders have been shut and New Zealand has been reliant on migration for, you know, the good part of a century, suddenly that flow has stopped. And what's that? And at the same time, correspondingly, our economy's growing. There's more money. People aren't traveling overseas. People are spending money internally, and there's just not enough people to do the stuff that needs to be done. So I think what we're saying is there is the opportunity. Well, what we are saying, there is the other opportunity to start talking to employers through us, not directly. That would not be a good move, and that may well set you up for a work visa or a temporary visa, same thing in the future. So Naseem, can you sort of approve what I just said there as a summary?
Absolutely,
hey?
Absolutely. Yeah. Every employer that we talk to, you know, I meet people at functions and they find out that I'm an immigration advisor. Everyone wants to know, when can I hire someone? I'm desperate for people. So in all occupations, in all industries, it's actually insane the demand that COVID has caused for skilled people in all possible jobs in New Zealand.
Yeah, look, and on that note, I just want to say that down here we feel very positive, which is crazy because we're very aware that you know, a lot of people are hurting across the world, but COVID has created a very unique opportunity for New Zealand, and as a country as a whole, we feel very just independent and proud, and it's given us a lot of confidence, and I think that is flowing through everyone, really, to be fair, and I guess out of a crisis can come an opportunity. And I think that's how everybody's feeling. Paul, look, you've done this for so many years. And to give you all an idea, we used to run expos in the UK, South Africa. We'd have tens of, thousands of people walking through the door, and Paul would stand on these stands talking to hundreds of people a day. And guiding them through the immigration process. I honestly do not know anybody in the immigration industry who has more knowledge about moving from one side of the world to the other than Paul. So, what are the pitfalls, Paul? Tell us now.
Massive pitfalls. I mean, you've probably seen I was busy typing away to all the questions that are flooding in, and we've only got a short space of time. The main pitfall is this: how do I get a job when I'm overseas? And a lot of people miss steps in this process. They jump straight to lodging an EOI. You certainly shouldn't do that, because you know it's a waste of time pretty much if you haven't got a job offer. But basically, in a nutshell, we take people through 4 stages of the move, and you break the move down into 4 stages. Preparation, very, very important. Employment support to help you get the job, because you've got to remove the barriers that exist between you and the employer. One massive tip for people on here tonight: whatever you do, don't fire off your CV to jobs you're seeing online at the moment. It's pretty much a waste of time, and you're wasting a massive opportunity. Talk to us first. It's a big message there. But preparation, employment support, visa application, relocation support. Get ready, get a job, get a visa, get on a plane. It sounds simple, because it's easy to understand, but it's difficult to do because every one of those steps has its own barriers and hurdles to overcome, and it's only by overcoming those barriers and hurdles in each step that you can move forward and actually make this happen. You've got to get ahead of everyone else. Everyone else is doing it wrong. They're firing off CVs. Don't do that. Do it right. Do it differently.
Yeah, it's a good tip. Now, look, one of the things that we offer is a consultation with Paul. And unfortunately, today our employment consultant, Hilary Bonham, is not on this webinar, but we have a employment consultant here in New Zealand who talks to employers every day, and would give you the opportunity to talk to her as well about whatever your occupation might be. So we have what we call as an immigration eligibility assessment. Okay, so this is not a hard sell. It's just what we're trying to say is that in order to go to the next step, if New Zealand is what you want to do, then you really need to understand whether you are eligible, from an immigration perspective. And some of you will think, of course I am. I'm qualified. I've been 10 years doing this. I'm a doctor. I'm a healthcare professional. Of course I qualify. Now, the thing about immigration is that there's a whole lot of other factors like health or the health of your spouse or age or even BMI, believe it or not. So that's a really important thing to do. But also, once we've done that, you'll get time to an hour with Paul. And we view that as really critical because I'm sure all of you have got questions. I can tell there's a lot of questions coming through here. And some of them are quite personal. And you just need to do a one-to-one thing. And Paul's just, has a lot of answers or a lot of really good solutions to that. So, Paul, can you just take us through what that eligibility assessment is in a little bit more detail and what it's going to cost people if they want to take that next step?
Absolutely. An eligibility assessment is absolutely essential. As you pointed out, Scott, it's not just to tell somebody that they're eligible for a visa. Of course, we do that as part of it. It's important. But how we do it, in very simple terms, is we get all the information we need from you as a single person, as a couple, as a family, whatever it is. It's per group, and we do that very simply with an online form that you fill in. You also email us CVs for any adults who are basically making the move yourself and with you. And once we've got that information, I look at that information and do my own assessment as an advisor. But I don't just rely on that. I then pass it over to Nazim and the team over in New Zealand as a second check. And it goes in front of Hilary and the recruitment team and Joe and all our other people over there. And they're looking at your employment options. So what you're actually getting is a full assessment of your employment and visa options in New Zealand. And then we create a report, and that report gets emailed to you. And as part of this whole session, you also get an hour, can be an hour, could be longer, whatever it is, but we set it as around an hour. And in that conversation with me, which we do on Zoom, I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to listen to what you're trying to do. I'm going to then use my knowledge and experience to map out a way forward for you. We're going to talk about visas, we're going to talk about timeframes, we're going to talk about costs, we're going to talk about jobs, we're going to talk about schools, whatever it is that you need to know, so that by the end of the call, you know how to move forward and you can move forward. And that's what we do. It's absolutely essential. Before you waste thousands of pounds, hundreds or thousands of hours trying to do this, just get a consultation with us, and you've got the information you need, and you're on the right track, and you've got a plan for moving forward. It's absolutely essential. The cost of it is £150. We used to charge £250 for this, and lots of people have paid that. Just because we're getting towards the end of the tunnel with COVID and stuff like that and everything else. People are getting more and more interested now, so it's £150. It's money well spent. It's very, very little risk, and it's the first step before you do anything. Just get that done, and it's really simple.
Thanks, Paul. Sorry, I got to interrupt you there. We've only got like 6 or 7 minutes to go. So, Nazim, just an update on what's happening with immigration in New Zealand. I see there's a few people. Some people have actually already applied for their visas here. Obviously, immigration in New Zealand has been slowed down and stopped processing. We did a seminar with Immigration New Zealand 2 weeks ago to about 150 employers, and they also They also came in here and talked to our immigration team recently. Now, can you tell us any idea of when they're going to be processing again offshore, and whether that really impacts the viewers today?
Offshore applications are still on hold until further advice. The government hasn't given a date that they'll start looking at them, and obviously the processing of offshore applications will be in line with when the borders are loosened. So when I saw someone said, oh, I'd lodged my application last year or something. So with some of our clients who had already lodged and they were sitting there, where we've been able to get them in under a border exemption, that application has then subsequently been pulled out of the, we'll call it the abyss, and been put in front of a case officer who's then, finalised it, and they've got their visas. There's only a few categories that you can apply for currently from offshore. There is announcements that are due to be made later this month with regards to different immigration policies. So we're hoping to see movement, but unfortunately I can't guarantee what that date would be. So all we know is instead that they keep adding different categories and types of people that qualify for exemptions, and that list keeps increasing while we're waiting for the world to get their vaccine rollout.
Okay, cool. Now another question that's come through. So look, we've got a lot of nurses that have arrived here recently. We've got some actually in managed isolation at the moment, which is fantastic, that we've helped get jobs. What's the story with their partners, please? And do they get a visa, and can they work? And can you just explain that, please?
So if you've applied for a border exemption and you've arrived as a critical worker, if you're the partner, you currently only have a visitor visa. So the nurse has the work rights on a visitor visa. It's a weird situation, some policy and legislation that they drew up in the middle of the night. So it works for now. So what we then do is, while you're in MIQ, we prepare and submit your further applications, giving you the right to all have work rights. So the individual or the family member that has the initial job that gets you into New Zealand, you've obviously got a work visa, but your husband, spouse, wife, partner, whatever, they get an open work visa. So they're able to work for anybody doing anything in any location. So it's good to know that as the partner, you'll also have the option to accept any job in your field or otherwise. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a really, really good point. That part of what we'll do with that eligibility assessment is work out, well, who would be the primary applicant? Because if someone's a nurse or a teacher, and then their partner is a policeman or an engineer, we kind of have to work out, well, who is most likely to be putting forward for the application. But regardless, both of you in the end will get work rights, which is fantastic, and we can help you with the jobs. Okay, so I'm just looking at my watch here. I know we started a little bit late, but we've only got 5 minutes to go. Paul, just as a sort of a wrap up, have you got any more advice for the people out there, please?
Yeah, the one thing here that I've noticed with a lot of people asking questions about, is my job skilled, is this skilled, is there demand for this, is there a demand for that? Yeah, look, we can work all that out in the consultation with me, obviously. But one of the key things that I really wanted to say to people was, don't wait until New Zealand says, right, our borders are open, because it's going to be a while, as we know, and you've got to use this time now, between now and the borders opening, to get ready. Think of it as a barrier, right? There's a barrier, and what we're building at the moment is a pipeline of people who are at that door waiting for that door to open to get into New Zealand, and on the other side there's a whole bunch of employers waiting for the door to open as well, and we're talking to both sides of that door at the moment. And so what we want to do is get you to the front of that door, so that when that door does open, you're ready. And that's a great way of envisaging it. So don't hang around, don't wait, because if you do, you're going to be right at the back of a big queue.
I don't think ever before have we had to try and envisage what's going to happen here, but we can see, if I'm talking about let's talk about construction for a moment. We've got a construction company, they need another 50 people. The first 50 people that are appropriate, they'll employ, and then that's it. They've got their 50. So it's really, but none of those 50 are in New Zealand now. They're all offshore. They've got to wait until the borders open for most of them. Some of the senior people will get through. And then once they've employed that, then anybody else, well, they're going to find a struggle to get a job. So I think that's what you're saying, Paul. It is what you're saying, and I can see it here on the ground. And we've never been in this situation before. So yeah, getting started now is the critical part. And also, Nassim, you're experiencing quite a few delays in people getting their documentation, aren't you?
Yeah, one thing that we've noticed is if you need qualifications, because we're using that to prove that you can do the job or something like that, people don't have the actual certificates, or if they need it for any registration purposes. And then they're going back to their, for example, their schools or colleges or universities. And because of COVID, those institutions are working on reduced hours. And so things that would normally take a couple of weeks to get are taking months. We've got someone who's saying, 8 months later, they're still waiting on a document. So I think, take into consideration that everything will take time and that third parties aren't going to work to your timeline. So the sooner you start, the better.
Yeah, look, particularly with universities, it seems that they are on slow mode, understaffed, and getting the original documentation that you require for your immigration and visa application is, in some instances, taking months. So once again, please start now. Okay, so look, unfortunately, we've only got 30 minutes. I know this is very broad. It's a little step-by-step plan on what's next. I know everybody here is in a different situation, but that's why we give you the opportunity to talk to Paul for an hour, because, it's a huge move and we totally get that. But Paul's a migrant. Nassim's originally from Australia, if I hadn't worked that out. So in our office here, we're full of people who have made the move, or their parents have made the move from somewhere in the world, and now they're happily living in New Zealand. But they did start with one step. And what we're trying to do is go, okay, well, what's the easiest possible thing to do in order to give you the knowledge of whether you can migrate or not migrate? And if you can migrate, how's that going to work out? How's that going to be? What's it going to look like? Give you clarity, save you money, save you time. So we just think that's fair and reasonable. That's how you start your journey. And that's what we do. That's why we do this for so long, because it works. So finally, I just want to say thank you again for coming and watching us at whatever hour it is in your home country. We always enjoy talking to you. We're very, very passionate about this, as you can see, and love helping people. Basically, that's the bottom line. So we bid you good night, good evening, good afternoon, or even good morning if you're on the same timeline as us, and Paul and Nassim.
Yeah. See you, everyone.
Okay. All right. Thank you for attending. Goodbye. See you in New Zealand.